The Safari Zones might be the strangest areas in Pokemon, with their rare encounters, fleeing Pokemon, and catching mechanics that come down to sheer luck. Love them or hate them, they stood out from the rest of your adventure. But I have an issue with them from an in-universe perspective. Just how unnatural were the Safari Zones? Yes, they're preserves for wild Pokemon, but all 4 contain distinctly different biomes, let alone the kinds of Pokemon available. Would their environments occur naturally if not for being on a preserve? Do the Pokemon feel like they belong in these biomes? Plus, how many of them are actually native to the region? And how has human intervention affected these environments, if at all?
Also, why not? Let's tier list them too.
Let's rank the 4 Safari Zones based on how ecologically natural they are, how native the Pokemon found in them are to the region, and then of course how fun they are.
That last one is purely my own opinion. Sorry not sorry if I hate your favorite. Now let's start with the zone that really made me start overthinking all of this, the Kanto Safari Zone.
From the get-go, it's clear that this place is unnatural to the Kanto region. Right after setting foot in Fuchsia City, it's shown that the Safari Zone is just one part of a larger amusement park, highlighting hard-to-find Pokemon. The first section is more of a zoo, with enclosures made for Pokemon that are rare in Kanto. Fun fact, the fossil Pokemon here is the opposite of the one you didn't choose in Mount Moon. And behind this zoo is the famed Safari Zone. And if the eye catch in Fire Red and Leaf Green tells you anything, it's that this place is massive, and that its environment is like nothing else found in Kanto. The biggest tell for that are the trees populated here. They look an awful lot like acacia trees, which are iconic flora found in African savannas. These could easily be umbrella thorn acacias, which can survive intense daytime heat and below 0 nighttime temperatures. With plenty of savanna plants being introduced to the confines of the Safari Zone, a hospitable habitat for Pokemon from an unknown savanna-like region is able to flourish. Even so, it's unnatural for Kanto, given that the region is mostly made up of temperate forest and freshwater biomes. I'm emphasizing these elements of the environment because the Kanto Safari Zone takes clear inspiration from the idea of an African safari.
Heck, it's in the name.
I would not be surprised if famous safari destinations like South Africa's Kruger National Park or Tanzania's Serengeti National Park inspired which Pokemon would be obtainable. I think this can help us identify the Pokemon in the Safari Zone that are likely native and non-native to Kanto. Looking at the encounters, there's only a handful that are also found outside of the Safari Zone. The Nidoran family is all over Kanto in rocky, jagged territory, so they could have easily lived in the area before the zone came to be and later adapted to the newly introduced habitats. 2 things can be true. The Pokemon don't necessarily need to be imported to the Safari Zone, and the imported environment could make the Pokemon thrive even more. I think something similar happens with Paris. While it and Parasect are found in dark caves and forests, they can thrive in these grasslands as well. In fact, the largest group of native Pokemon are found in water habitats. Magikarp, Poliwag, Goldeen, Psyduck, Slowpoke, and Krabby are all Pokemon that are easily findable in bodies of water across the rest of Kanto. Due to this, they probably lived here naturally before the zone's creation. But this brings us to our first likely non-native Pokemon, Dratini. Dratini and its evolved form Dragonair are rare fishing encounters, and much like the non-native Pokemon in the rest of this video, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where they originate. But we can still see what common environments they share across regions. For Dratini, nearly all of its encounters are alongside bodies of water, and several require fishing. Many of these aquatic areas have ties to myths, like Johto's Dragon's Den, or the Crown Tundra's Balamir Lake. Safe to say, this Pokemon's natural habitat is just below the water surface, especially in remote, possibly sacred areas. Back on land, 2 Pokemon stand out as outliers, Doduo and Venonat. Both of these Pokemon can be found outside of the Safari Zone. Doduo occupies land to the west along the cycling road, and Venonat makes its mark along coastal routes from Silence Bridge to Fuchsia. Even if a theoretical fence or wall kept these Pokemon inside the preserve, there have to be ways for these wild Pokemon to easily escape. Despite not having wings, Doduo can learn fly. Several probably fled the zone via airspace. Plus, when Venonat evolves, it also gets its wings. These 2 are great examples of Pokemon introduced to a new region who then manage to find a new habitat outside of the zone.
Invasive species, if you will.
But I'm also super stubborn on these 2 not being native to Kanto because of a similarly artificially made biome, the Savannah biome and Blueberry Academy. Have you ever noticed how many Pokemon here are also found in Kanto Safari Zone? Venonat, Doduo, Execute, Rhyhorn, Scyther, Chansey, and Tauros, all roaming free. And since the terrarium was made from scratch, I'm willing to bet it reflects the Pokemon world's version of a theoretical Africa-based region more than the Safari Zone ever could. More Pokemon here are based on animal species found on the continent, including Blitzel, Girafarig, Litleo, and Sandile. It's a more complete picture of animals you'd expect to see on Safari, where these overlapping Kanto Safari Zone Pokemon are possibly from. I think this also demonstrates that they do indeed thrive in the Kanto Safari Zone's imported environment. Again, their exact origin is difficult to pinpoint. Chansey is easily found in Sinnoh, Alola, and Paldea, while Tauros is often on routes surrounding ranches as if it were livestock. Still very open to interpretation, but I must also address the last two Pokemon in the Kanto Safari Zone, Pinsir and Kangaskhan. I think they're non-native as well. Pinsir likely favors a warmer climate, such as the lush jungle in Alola or Route 229 in Sinnoh's postgame, while Kangaskhan is more difficult to narrow down. It's often in drier locations you can coincidentally find Cubone in, like Wella Volcano Park, or the Isle of Armor's warm-up tunnel, so it checks out that both Pokemon could thrive in a dry savanna environment. Now, the last piece to address for this Safari Zone is the human intervention. Clearly, a ton of intervention had to happen for this preserve to exist. Importing all the plants and Pokemon and the upkeep needed for them to thrive in an unnatural climate requires a massive amount of work. I have no idea how this place managed to stay afloat when the Warden lost their teeth. No one could understand the poor man, and yet the Safari Zone continued on. What gumption. Alright, tier list time. For how natural the Kanto Safari is to the Kanto region, it's F tier. This is a tremendously imported environment, likely from an unknown region based on an eastern or southern African country's savanna. Don't get me wrong, it's really cool to see prosper, but it's deeply unnatural. In terms of how natural the Pokemon are to the rest of Kanto, I'm gonna have to go with C tier. I am uncertain. It's clear that some Pokemon, especially the water types, have claims to be Kantonian, but the big players, Tauros, Dratini, Kangaskhan, they're just not from Kanto. Lots of non-natives to Kanto here, but that's also why this Safari Zone works so well. You want to see those rare, unnatural Pokemon, and that's why I'll give it an A tier for fun. A whole new environment with plenty of new encounters that can be tedious and tough to find, but it's fun. Actually very fun. Yeah, solid A tier. Now let's tackle the second zone, the Hoenn Safari Zone, found outside of Lilycove City on Route 121. And it's already such a different story compared to Kanto's. The big highlight here is the environment. Honestly, it matches the rest of northeastern Hoenn's environment to a T. It's the lush, verdant, and wet subtropical biome that Hoenn is fondly remembered for. I highly doubt that this environment is man-made. For all we know, this Safari Zone's flora could be untouched. Sadly, the same cannot be said for the Pokemon. This is the only Safari Zone to feature no new Pokemon from its generation. No Hoenn Pokemon appear here. Moreover, it's wild to me how few of them are likely native to Hoenn. Oddish and Gloom are found all over the region, and this uber green landscape is perfect for them. If they're Hoenn locals, I would not be shocked. Similar to Kanto, the two Pokemon found via fishing are also found in ponds throughout Hoenn. Goldeen and Magikarp are both likely native. Lastly, when using Rock Smash on boulders, you can find Geodude. This is applicable elsewhere in Hoenn, like Route 111 or Granite Cave.
And that's it.
So let's unpack the rest. Let's group a bunch of them together. These are Pokemon found not just in Hoenn's Safari Zone, but also in Kanto's. Doduo, Rhyhorn, and Pinsir. Nothing new to add here. Seems like they're able to thrive in this corner of the preserve, while Doduo is running around trying to get the zoomies out. Girafarig is a funny one to me because it also appears in the terrarium savanna biome. Maybe it was pulled here with the others from a supposed African-based region. It's often found near lakes in the wild, so perhaps it likes the moist climate. Psyduck was a surprise to me. It's nowhere else in Hoenn. It's usually plentiful in most regions, but not native here. Pikachu is another shocker. Exclusive to Hoenn in this preserve. It's funny to me that Pikachu is so rare outside of Kanto in the first 4 regions. It's not native to Hoenn, nowhere in Johto, and yes, it's found in Sinnoh's trophy garden, but there's a decent chance it had to be introduced there with all the other Pokemon this poor butler has to import.
Phanpy is one of my favorite Pokemon.
And I'm unclear why it's in this Safari Zone. It and Donphan are discoverable in seldom areas. You've got the mountain roots of Johto, Mount Silver, some outbreaks, and then all over the west province of Paldea. Paldea's terrain matches Hoenn's Safari Zone the most. but I'm just not satisfied with that conclusion for where these Phanpy came from. Wobbuffet is also a wild inclusion. Despite why not being introduced in Gen 3, it's only native to the rare Mirage Island. Even the one you hatched from the egg given to you in Lava Ridge Town doesn't imply it's necessarily native to Hoenn. And then, why is Wobbuffet in the grass here? Most of its native habitats are in dark caverns, but it is found in the tall grass in places like Galar. So maybe these Wobbuffet originate from the Galar region. It's certainly plausible. Nattu and Xatu get similar treatment to Wobbuffet. They commonly live near ruins and places of legend. And then also the wild area when foggy, which I guess does have some legendary vibe, right? I don't know. Maybe the legend has to do with Natsu looking like a safari ball. I'm not the only one who sees it, right? Another giant question mark to me is Heracross. Normally you come across it in trees or in the bush, but it feels off in this environment. Maybe it likes the aroma? I don't know. What's fun though is that this is the first time Heracross was used as a rival of sorts to Pinsir. Pinsir was often a counterpart to Scyther, but that's changed over time. For instance, one is found in Area 3 of the Safari Zone, the other in Area 4. They're version exclusives in X and Y and Sword and Shield's DLC, placed together on Unova's Route 12, and in Lumio City's Wild Zone 13. Wild that it began in this Safari Zone. Emerald's postgame also throws in 2 additional areas that are littered with Johto Pokemon, and they are all just not native. There are so many of them, and the only one I can give some leeway to is Marill, since it's well established on other Hoenn routes.
Need I mention the hidden Dex Nav encounters in Oras that only exist for Megas?
All in all, this Safari Zone has lots of non-native Pokemon. On the other hand, it has a surprisingly low human footprint. Not much human intervention seems to have taken place. Sure, you got stairs and acrobike rails in some spots, but they don't seem to interfere with anything. The only interference can come from the Pokeblock feeders, which in the game makes it easier to get a specific nature on a Pokemon. The only human thing that's worth mentioning is the lore given as to why the Safari game doesn't happen in Oras. There's a book in the entry area that tells the history. Oras' Safari Zone was like Gen 3's before the owner got greedy and raised the price of admission. People then stopped coming, and the zone went bankrupt. The owner literally fled the region, others took communal control of the zone, and then the ex-owner returned as a volunteer, overjoyed by the fact that the zone was still going on.
I don't know what the moral of that story is.
Okay, tier list time. In terms of how natural the Safari Zone is to the Hoenn region, I'll give it an A tier. This preserve could easily be untouched, and the biodiversity would blend in with the rest of Hoenn. But it's also impossible to 100% confirm though. How natural the Pokemon feel to the Hoenn region? I'll go with D. Oh wait, I never added an F tier to this one. Is it F tier? No, no, it's D. I'll give it D. Like, Oddish, Arak, and the fish are the only ones that feel like they're native to Hoenn, and some inclusions like Phanpy and Heracross don't feel overly natural in my opinion, but maybe I'm wrong. Also, Emerald's postgame? No, almost. Almost. No. But for the fun factor, I'll go B. There's no real difficulty involved with finding Pokemon in this zone. The worst encounters are like 5%. And then you need to swap out bikes to access different areas. It's fine, I guess I'd call it standard. Not bad, but not stellar.
Sinnoh Safari Zone is so special that no one even bothers to call it a Safari Zone.
Welcome to the Great Marsh. And yeah, that's a lot of marsh. History says that Pastoria City was founded to protect the vast quagmires in this part of Sinnoh, and I completely believe it. We even got to see what some of these marshlands once looked like before the city came to be in Legends Arceus. Heck, there's even plenty of marsh outside of Safari Zone limits out on Route 212. I don't think you could argue against it. This bog, this swamp, this great marsh, it's completely natural. And for the most part, the Pokemon that call the Great Marsh home are native too. This breakdown might get a little complicated, so bear with me. The encounters differ based on which Sinnoh game you play. I'm going to begin with the roster found in Diamond and Pearl and their remakes. Here, plenty of Pokemon species you've already met in Sinnoh reappear. Starly, Bidoof, Badoo, Hoot, Psyduck, Magikarp, Barboach. Sure, this environment differs from the ones where you first encounter these Pokemon, but since they're so populous across the region, I cannot question that they're Sinnoh natives. 2 new common encounters are Marill and Wooper. Both are already found near bodies of water in other regions, and this wetland biome must be perfect for them. Wooper even resides on the Route 212 bog, as does Marill and Platinum. I'm thinking both are natural to the Great Marsh. Now, in-game, what makes finding rare Pokemon here tough are the changing Pokemon, which only have a slim chance of appearing in the zone every 24 hours before they refresh. 3 of which are exclusive to the Great Marsh: Carnivine, Skorupi, and Croagunk. And I'm also going to claim that these 3 are native too. Carnivine is found in other marshes across the world. Skorupi tends to live in one of 2 places: wastelands or wetlands. They love sand and they love mud. And of course, Croagunk is the iconic mascot for the Great Marsh. I don't think anyone has the heart to tell the Pokemart workers that their log-carved idol isn't from these parts. And yes, it's common in marshy areas and other regions too. On top of that, they all appear in Ancient Sinnoh in Legends Arceus, so hard to argue there.
However, I think the argument can be made that some of these Pokemon were introduced to the Great Marsh once upon a time.
Big caveat here. They're not in Hisui in Legends Arceus. The bone I'll throw is that yes, they're not, but Vulpix, Stantler, Goomy, they're not in Sinnoh. Environments change over time, and Pokemon in those environments do too. They're not native to Hisui, but they are to Sinnoh. The core of what I'm saying is that they came to Sinnoh naturally. They likely weren't introduced to the environment by humans. The same logic applies to Kanto and Gen 2. 3 years made a big difference then. Probably more than 3 years here though. Platinum, on the other hand, added more Pokemon to the Sinnoh Regional Pokédex, and swapped around the encounters in the marsh, with a few new ones added. Yanma and Tangela pop up now, and they love the Crimson Mirelands in days gone by. They're Hisui natives. That's how far back they go. The other addition, I'm gonna say, is actually not native: Tropius. I think it's probably happy in a wet biome, but in the wild, in places like Route 119 or Executor Island, it's rainy, not swampy. Tropius feels like it's from somewhere more tropical than the colder Sinnoh climate. I wouldn't say it's the only transplant though. After obtaining the National Pokédex, several more Pokemon appear. Arbok is available through the dual slot method if you have Fire Red. Carvanha can be reeled in with the Super Rod. And additions to the changing Pokemon rosters include Paris, Execute, Kangaskhan, Shroomish, Gulpin, and in Platinum only, Kecleon.
I can't find a logical, in-universe reason as to why they all suddenly appear.
It's just as nonsensical as trying to make sense of mass outbreaks.
Both just feel so unnatural from an ecological standpoint.
And because these Pokemon are so rare in Sinnoh that they don't even get a roster spot in the regional Pokédex, I'm going to go with all of them as not native. It feels wrong to some extent. Shroomish and Gulpin feel like they belong here. And Carvanha's only gripe is that you can't get the correct fishing rod until the post-game. But there are too many hyper-specific scenarios that would need to take place for them to feel native. The only one who has any skin in the game is Paris, since it was a Hisui native. But the environment you now find it in is just too drastically different from back then. All in all, the grand majority of Pokemon in the Sinnoh Regional Pokédex that call the Great Marsh home are Sinnoh natives. Hard to say the same for the post-game editions. Hard pass on those. Now, human interference definitely played a role in the creation and preservation of the Great Marsh, but for the most part, it feels untouched, with one bright orange exception. The Quick Tram makes me feel things. My first reaction to it is quite negative. There's a rail network in here? Really? Did the Great Marsh really need rails and stations built?
It threw me off at first before I thought about it more.
Most national parks require transit of some kind. Most tend to be roads, but here, it's a train. I also give it some grace since the Great Marsh is based on the Kushiro Shitsugen National Park, the largest marsh in Japan. That real-world national park is over 280 square kilometers. And there's a scenic train ride that goes through the wetlands that the Great Marsh train has to be based on. Sadly though, the real scenic train is being retired at the end of this year, but hey, forever preserved in Diamond and Pearl. Imagining the Great Marsh as this massive ecosystem that is so large that train travel is necessary to cross it lets me give this a pass. Beyond that, humans built an observation tower. That's a fantastic way to give people a closer look at wild Pokemon without damaging the ecosystem. And the marsh itself doesn't seem to be impeded by people walking about. Humans have left a minimal footprint on this beloved swamp. So let's add the Great Marsh to the tier list. For how natural the Envira S, it's only a safari zone to protect this natural environment. I don't need to second guess it. For how native the Pokemon are to Sinnoh, I'm gonna split this in two. For those in the regional decks, S tier.
Tropius is the only introduced species as far as I'm concerned, and that's only in Platinum. For the National Dex editions in the post-game, oh boy, F tier, yeah, that's F tier. That's definitely F tier. Paris has like a minimal chance of maybe being native. The rest, no. I just don't see how. Very unnatural in my book. And then for how fun it is. The swamp is memorable, the train is memorable, but going about the encounters in Diamond and Pearl kinda sucks. Like, why are we still seeing Starly and Bidoof way more than Skorupi or Croagunk? And the whole wait the next day, maybe you'll get a rare encounter thing kinda blows too. Like, I hate having to wait for an unknown amount of time, but I guess it can also be better than a 1% encounter. I don't know. I'll give it a C. It's memorable, but other zones feel way more fun to play through. This one requires both unpredictable luck and patience, of which I have very little. In universe though, I love the Great Marsh. I just gotta glaze it. What more can be said?
The fourth and final Safari Zone.
If you know the intricacies of the Johto Safari Zone, you'd probably think this is the longest portion of the video. But no, hyperfixating on the details nearly broke me.
The Johto Safari Zone is only present in the remakes, and the lore behind it is wild. Boba, the Kanto Safari Zone warden, closed the Fuchsia location and opened up a new Safari Zone in the mountains behind Cianwood City. It's so remote and rural that to accommodate its newfound popularity, a bazaar had to be quickly assembled for visitors, plus a Pokemon Center. That, and after catching a Geodude and a Sandshrew, you become the owner. You're giving this to me, how old am I? And this is where the red flags start flying. This place is deeply unnatural. The main gimmick here is the ability to swap around the biomes where you encounter wild Pokemon. And how on Arceus' Blue Earth does any of this work ecologically? Sure, some biomes feel like you would find them in Johto, but some, like the desert, marshland, and wasteland, definitely don't. It's also implied that these poor workers are the ones who are manually switching out areas. Where do you keep them? And if the environment is like 100% artificial, what about the Pokemon? Where do we start? So in-game, before you beat the champion, the only available Pokemon are from Johto and Kanto. And because there was no Safari Zone in the Gen 2 games, all of these Pokemon on screen are commonly found across Johto, and also happen to be found in this new Gen 4 Safari Zone. Of course, there are exceptions. Most of them have to do with the fact that the following Pokemon are only found once you set foot in Kanto: Cubone, Clefairy, Mr. Mime, Grimer, Doduo, Kangaskhan, Rhyhorn, Murkrow, and Larvitar. Instead of having to wait for these encounters, they're now accessible much earlier on. And while these are not Johto natives, they're mostly neighboring Kanto ones. Even the ones not native to Kanto 3 years ago are now found in the wild, being the leftovers from Kanto Safari Zone, and then Mr. Mime just started showing up outside of Pallet Town, I guess. I don't know. And a few other asterisks to address. Jigglypuff can be found in Johto in Gen 2, but not in the remakes. Similarly, Mischievous was Kanto only on the Game Boy, but resides in the Heart Gold Soul Silver edition of Cliff Cave. One Lapras appears weekly in Union Cave, so it's hard to say if it's Johto native as well. And Tauros, I'm pulling strings at. It's found just outside of the Safari Zone gate on Route 48, and it's seemingly native, but something feels off about it, especially since its Johto counterpart Miltank isn't here. Maybe they were escapees of the zone. The zone replaced an old ranch? I'm pulling on straws with Tauros. I'll leave it with the maybe label. But even though the majority of Pokemon here are likely Johto natives, their Safari Zone habitats are still rotatable. A bunch can inexplicably disappear in seconds. If they can vanish like this, just how natural are these environments?
It feels impossible to try and apply logical reasoning to this, which really bugs me.
Adding fuel to the fire are all the block encounters. In the post-game, placing certain blocks in certain areas and waiting for a specific number of real-world days to pass will draw in rare Pokemon, especially Hoenn and Sinnoh Pokemon not native to Johto. Seriously, the amount of new encounters this adds in is overwhelming, and I just can't act like it's natural. Like, why does leaving 10 forest objects and 14 peak objects for 70 days in a meadow make Riolu decide to show face? Took it over 2 months to scout out just to be like, okay, I guess this place is pretty chill. Just like the Great Marsh, most of these post-game editions do not feel native. And lastly, human interference.
Do I
Do I need to say more? I hope these guys are union. To keep it short and sweet, this one easily relies on people the most for maintenance. Even beyond the obvious changing areas feature, the areas themselves are pretty lovely biomes that must require major upkeep from people to keep them in tip-top shape. It solely exists because of man.
Okay, final parts of the tier list. For natural, F. Those workers better be getting paid well. The whole rotation gimmick makes this so unnatural. I'm gonna split pre and post on this one as well. Yeah, I'm gonna, wait. Why'd I add a second one? I don't want that. There it is. I guess I am stuck with two of them. I'm gonna split pre and post game Pokemon here again. For the main game, I'll give it a B. These are all Johto and Kanto Pokemon, no doubt about that. But again, the biome rotation thing is so unnatural that I feel like I have to be more critical here. And then for the post-game editions, I'll go D. It's a lot like the Hoenn Safari Zone, where clearly there's a bunch of introduced species. I know several are obtainable in other ways in Heart Gold Soul Silver, like with the sounds or certain headbutt trees, but their scarcity in all locations just feels D tier. I wish I could delete you. This bothers me. And then for fun, hear me out. S tier. I think this is the most fun Safari Zone. The customization features make very little sense in universe, but from a gameplay perspective, it's so much fun. There's no step limit like in the other zones. I didn't mention that at all. Nor did I mention how weird it is that we throw bait, rocks, mud, Pokeblocks. Anyway, being able to stay in the zone until you run out of Safari Balls was always nice. And the rare encounters are tedious to find, especially waiting for IRL days to pass, but at least with guides, you have a roadmap to get there. Okay, final tier lists. Pause if you want to look these over and tell me how wrong I am.
So, what have we unpacked here? The Safari Zones have so many different elements to them that make them stand out. Some, the environments are completely imported to lure people in to seek out rare Pokemon. Another might keep their biome the same and just let non-native Pokemon run amok. Or perhaps the natural environment is the selling point. Where else would these Pokemon be in the region? Just how unnatural the ecosystem is, or just how native, non-native the Pokemon encounters are, is merely one piece of what makes the Safari Zone unforgettable. At the end of the day, each Safari Zone has a different reason to be your favorite. As fun as speculating about the Pokemon world's ecological systems is, I don't think any Safari Zone would be memorable if something about them didn't feel unnatural. These Pokemon wildlife preservations were a chaotic blast that differed from the rest of the game. I miss that they're not around nowadays. But these 4 zones are only so remarkable because their unnatural elements made us wonder even more about the mysterious world of Pokemon. And I, for one, am excited to see just what I'll find in the zone next.